If you feel exhausted, unfocused, or just quietly disconnected, there's nothing wrong with you. What you're feeling isn't a personal failure. It's a shared human response to, well, to the way the world works now.
That heavy sensation, right? That biological drag that you just can't quite shake. Even when you did everything society told you was right, like getting enough sleep or taking a vacation.
Oh, exactly.
That's the subject of our deep dive today. We are really investigating why the default state for modern humans so often feels like exhaustion.
Absolutely. And welcome everyone to another My Mind MashUps deep dive. This is where we unravel mysteries, spark curiosity, and try to make sense of complex ideas together.
And today we are diving deep into what we're calling the ambient strain.
Why the modern world is collectively just so tired, even when nothing specific seems to be wrong. We've collected a ton of sources on neurological factors, environmental shifts, and some really profound psychological consequences to unpack the true systemic cause of this modern fatigue.
Our mission today is crucial, I think. We want to move this conversation away from personal failing and into biological reality.
Yes.
We want to provide you with an understanding that validates your experience, giving you the agency to respond structurally, not just through, sheer willpower.
That's right. Because this feeling, it didn't come from nowhere. We're committed to sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and expanding understanding with every single deep dive we do.
So let's get into it.
And before we do, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy content that makes you think. Okay, let's unpack this whole thing. I think we have to start with validation, right? Because the most frustrating part of this modern exhaustion is just trying to articulate it. You go to the doctor, they run tests, everything looks fine, and yet you feel perpetually just depleted.
Right. It feels like something is fundamentally wrong, but you can't point to a single act of trauma or a villain.
And so the immediate conclusion you draw is, I am the problem.
But the data we have now overwhelmingly shows otherwise. What we're all experiencing isn't idiosyncratic. It's this invisible burden of what's called ambient stress, and it's population-wide.
Okay, so let's define that. How do psychologists define that feeling? Because stress usually makes you think of a deadline or some big crisis.
Ambient stress is different. It's defined as this diffuse pressure. It's chronic, it's low grade, it's non-urgent, and crucially, it feels intractable.
Intractable, so you can't solve it.
You can't solve it. It runs below your conscious awareness. It's not that sudden acute trauma of a major crisis, but more like a constant background hum of tension. It's the cumulative load of all these minor stressors that feel perpetually out of your control.
Can we break down what those minor stressors actually are in a modern context? Because they feel so abstract.
They are abstract, but they're very real energy drains. Think about, say, pandemic aftershocks. The subtle but constant social calculation you have to do now in public spaces.
Yeah.
Then add to that the pervasive economic uncertainty, the never-ending flow of geopolitical and climate news that just demands emotional bandwidth. And even just persistent noise pollution.
Right. None of those are a single sharp crisis that you solve and then you move past it.
Exactly. They are all chronic, low-grade signals of instability.
I really like the analogy that we talked about before we started. I think it makes that energy drain feel more quantifiable.
The phone analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, think of ambient stress like this. It's like leaving 5 heavy, resource-intensive apps running in the background of your phone. You aren't actively using them, but they are silently draining your battery and slowing your processing power just by being there. Your brain, in its role as a threat monitor, is basically running a high-resource background process just to keep track of these low-level, unresolvable threats.
So the depletion is coming from system maintenance, not just from the active work you're doing.
Precisely. We feel depleted because the system is always reserving energy for potential threats that never quite materialize into something you can act on.
And we have global data to back this up. This isn't just a feeling people have.
Not at all. We see this validation everywhere.
Yeah.
Look at the research from the American Psychological Association.
Yeah.
A poll in late 2021 found that a staggering 75% of people reported stress-related problems like headaches, fatigue, or just feeling overwhelmed.
75%. 3 out of 4 people.
When you see a number like that,
Yeah.
you have to conclude the problem is environmental, not a lack of personal discipline.
And this isn't just in the U.S. Internationally. The numbers are just as stark.
The Gallup 2021 World Emotional Survey. It found that 4 in 10 adults worldwide reported feeling a lot of stress yesterday, and that was a record high at the time.
Wow.
We're seeing a measurable societal state change. There was a quote in our source material that I think really captures the inner experience. It's this feeling of being always just a little bit off balance.
Right.
The source said, we kind of function at a level like everything's fine and normal, when in fact, biologically, they're not.
It's the cost of that performance, isn't it? The cost of constantly functioning as if everything is fine, even when your underlying physiological systems are ringing this low-level alarm bell.
That's the shared mental load concept. Our whole society, collectively, is carrying this massive amorphous weight.
And when the acute crises, like, the height of the pandemic, when those pass, that ambient stress doesn't just evaporate.
No, it lingers in our nervous system, ready to be reactivated by the next news headline or even just a minor interruption. So our baseline level of stress is elevated, and our threshold for tipping into full-blown anxiety is just much, much lower than it was a decade ago.
Which becomes unavoidable when you look at the population-wide shift data around mental health. The scale of this shift it's truly structural.
Between 2015 and 2024, the prevalence of anxiety among U.S. adults went up by a dramatic 78%. Depression prevalence rose by 73%.
78%.
But the hardest hitting number, for me, is the increase in suicidal ideation, which went up by 92%. These figures aren't small changes.
No.
They represent a fundamental societal deterioration of well-being.
When you see nearly double the rate of major distress indicators in less than a decade, you cannot attribute that to personal failing.
You can't.
It forces a reframing. It stops being about something is wrong with you individually, and it becomes definitively about something profound has changed about the environment we're living in.
It's proof that the stress isn't just self-generated. It's an adaptation to the conditions we're given. And this environmental stress validates why you might feel exhausted or constantly on edge for quote-unquote no reason.
Yeah.
Your system is just paying the tax of complexity and chronic, low-grade uncertainty.
And once we see that systemic toll on the nervous system, the symptoms in the brain become so much clearer. And this is so important because the environment is literally molding the wiring inside our heads. So that brings us into the inner workings, right? The cognitive and biological toll of modern tech and our relentless connectivity. We have to stop seeing mental depletion as a lack of willpower and start recognizing it for what it is, a complex neurological reality.
That's the core of it. The key finding here is that modern life is, in a way, perfectly designed to exploit our brain's ancient attention and reward system.
Exploit them.
Yes, leading directly to mental fatigue and a chronic state of what you could call doping deficit. The systems are working, but they are just being overloaded by design.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of dopamine dysregulation and the pursuit engine, because I think a lot of people still misunderstand what dopamine actually does. They hear pleasure chemical.
Right, and it's really more of the motivation chemical or the anticipation chemical.
Yeah.
It's what drives us to seek out resources. Neuroscientists describe its function using a concept called reward prediction error, or RPE.
RPE.
So dopamine doesn't spike that much after you get a reward. It spikes for the anticipation and the surprise. When something novel appears, a notification, a new headline, a surprise text, that RPE signal fires. And that forces the brain to expend immediate energy to update its model of the world and redirect your attention.
Okay, so if our phones and our feeds are constantly optimizing for novelty and unpredictable intermittent rewards, that little red number on an app icon, that unexpected like, then we're forcing that pursuit engine to just run constantly.
Exactly. We're getting these endless tiny dopamine hits that demand our attention and promise something exciting, but they rarely deliver any kind of meaningful, sustained completion or satisfaction.
So it's all chase, no catch.
It is. And that constant activation without a genuine reward like, say, completing a major project or securing a physical resource, it depletes the system's reserves. We end up in a chronic state of dopamine deficit, which leads to this generalized lower motivation and a feeling of profound dissatisfaction, even while we're hyperconnected.
There was an analogy in the sources that was truly striking when you think about this perpetual digital chase.
It connects the digital experience to biology very forcefully. It says, just as the hypodermic needle is the delivery mechanism for drugs like heroin, the smartphone is the modern-day hypodermic needle delivering digital dopamine for a wired generation.
Wow.
That constant low-level activation just burns out the very circuitry that's designed to motivate us toward our long-term goals.
And this endless pursuit, it connects directly to the high metabolic cost of what we call multitasking. We're constantly shifting our attention to chase those little digital rewards. We aren't just wasting time. We're taxing our brains tremendously.
And the neurological truth here is so critical. Human brains are not built for true parallel processing, not for high-level cognitive tasks. What we call multitasking is neurologically rapid task switching.
So we're just jumping back and forth really fast.
You're stopping one process, like writing a report, diverting resources to a new low-level one, like checking an email, and then you struggle to redirect those resources back.
What's the price tag for that switch in terms of energy and productivity?
It carries a really hefty cognitive debt. It's called the switching cost. Research from the APA shows that this frequent task switching can sap up to 40% of a person's productive time.
40%.
And we have to emphasize, this is a metabolic cost. Focusing uses glucose and oxygen. Every time you switch tasks, your brain has to reload all the parameters for the new task and then reestablish the context for the old one. That is a measurable biological expense, not a personal failing.
40% sounds astronomical. What does that debt actually look like in a typical 8-hour workday? I mean, is that energy debt recoverable right away?
Often, no. And the UC Irvine research on recovery time is maybe the most astonishing piece of this whole puzzle.
Okay.
They found that after just one interruption, one single email notification, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to regain full focused attention on the original complex task.
23 minutes from one notification.
Yes. So if you're interrupted just 4 times in an hour, you're constantly paying that 23-minute tax. You are perpetually operating in a state of cognitive recovery. You never get back to baseline.
Wow. That means that someone who works from home, dealing with a steady stream of messages and notifications, is structurally prevented from ever reaching true, deep focus. The brain is literally exhausted by the administrative overhead of just managing its own attention.
And this fragmentation has profound long-term consequences. Studies show that chronic multitasking can actually reduce gray matter density in the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
And what does that part of the brain do?
It's linked to focus, to inhibitory control, and emotional regulation. So the brain is literally adapting and rewiring itself for distraction, which makes it physically harder to engage in deep, sustained work later on.
The brain is physically changing to accommodate this fractured reality we're feeding it. But the taxation of connectivity, it doesn't even require us to physically engage with the interruptions, does it?
That's the most insidious part, the invisible tax. Research shows that the mere presence of a notification sound or alert, even if you successfully ignore it, reduces your cognitive control and slows your reaction times.
How?
Even the possibility of an interruption activates the brain's attention system, which diverts resources away from your primary task.
The quote that stood out to me was, "The notification doesn't have to interrupt you. Your brain hears it and shifts." That explains that ambient anxiety of modern life, right? Your brain is constantly primed for interruption, even during moments you think are quiet.
It's always waiting for the next signal. And this leads us to this crucial reframing of our cognitive goal. The modern world tells us we must be constantly relevant, constantly updated.
Right.
But your brain wasn't designed for constant relevance. It was designed for meaning, for finding deep connection, solving complex long-term problems, and prioritizing survival. When we confuse those two things and we feed the brain endless, immediate, relevant stimuli instead of meaningful engagement, we just fundamentally burn out the system.
And if this is resonating with you, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive. We are dedicated to sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and expanding understanding with every episode.
Because once we understand this neurological drain, we have to look at how the environment prevents us from ever refilling those reserves. And this becomes so important because the brain always adapts before the mind understands why.
Okay, so we've established that our internal systems are being exploited and drained by the demands of digital life. Now we have to look outside ourselves. How does the modern environment prevent our nervous system from achieving genuine rest and recovery?
This is where we run into the constant onslaught and what's called the restoration deficit.
Restoration deficit.
This is a foundational concept in environmental psychology. Our nervous systems evolved to recover in environments that offer soft fascination.
Soft fascination.
What?
What is that?
It refers to activities that engage our attention involuntarily but effortlessly. Things like watching waves, or gazing at a forest canopy, listening to rain, watching a fire. These activities allow the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for that hard, directed attention, to finally rest and recover.
But modern life is just an endless loop of directed attention.
Precisely. Modern life demands it constantly. Reading screens, navigating traffic, processing visual clutter, It fatigues the brain's regulatory systems without ever offering that recovery time that soft fascination provides.
And that's why this idea of a false rest is so common and so confusing. We feel like we're relaxing when we collapse on the couch with Netflix or scroll through social media. But we've confused numbing out with actually resting.
You've removed the physical labor, yes, but you maintain or even increase the high sensory load. You're still engaging directed attention, still parsing complex visual and auditory information. Genuine physiological rest requires a true safety signal. Silence, darkness, effortless engagement, and the modern world rarely sends that signal.
And that lack of genuine rest is just drastically compounded by light, screens, and circadian chaos. We're physiologically extending the day by hours.
The biological mechanism is pretty straightforward, but it's devastatingly effective. Our bodies rely on detecting darkness to start the sleep-wake cycle. So exposure to bright screens, especially blue light, or even just dim but intense LED lights in the evening, it suppresses the release of melatonin,
The sleep hormone.
the hormone crucial for regulating sleep timing and quality.
And how significant is that disruption, really?
Well, the Harvard research is very clear on this. They note that light at night is part of the reason so many people don't get enough sleep. But it goes beyond just the timing. The data shows that daily electronic screen use before bed reduces sleep quantity by about 50 minutes per week.
Almost an hour a week.
But more importantly, it tanks the quality of the sleep. It often suppresses REM sleep and deep wave sleep, which are crucial for cognitive rest, memory consolidation, and processing emotion.
So you can be in bed for 8 hours but still not feel recovered because your body spent the whole night fighting the signal that it was supposed to stay awake.
That's the key. The quality of those 8 hours is compromised because your body's primary rest system has been fighting an artificially extended day.
And it's not just the visual input. The physiological toll of noise pollution is this silent menace in every city and honestly in a lot of suburban homes now too. We think we tune it out, but our deeper systems do not.
No, they don't. Chronic noise traffic, construction, even unpredictable noises like nearby conversations or a mechanical hum triggers our deep, ancient stress response. Your body registers noise as an omnipresent danger signal.
A danger signal.
It activates the fight or flight pathways, even if your conscious mind has learned to ignore the sound.
So noise isn't just annoying, it's a measurable physical stressor that your body registers the same way it would register an actual threat.
Exactly. And this ongoing exposure elevates stress hormones like cortisol, it elevates blood pressure, inflammatory markers, and sustained elevated cortisol is directly linked to higher risks of anxiety, depression, impaired cognition.
So even the hum of an air conditioner could be a problem.
The World Health Organization has explicitly categorized chronic environmental noise as a public health hazard. Even a constant hum at 55 decibels is enough to interfere with deep sleep recovery over time.
So, if the brain is constantly primed for digital interruption, and the body is constantly fighting light and background noise, we arrive at the core issue of sensory overload. It's 24/7 vigilance. The nervous system never gets a true ceasefire.
Without structured silence, consistent darkness, and environments that allow for soft fascination, the nervous system never truly recuperates. The body's inner alarm system just remains slightly elevated around the clock.
And that leads to that really hard-hitting conclusion from the sources.
Yeah.
You didn't lose the ability to rest the environment. Stopped allowing it. The tools and the conditions for recovery have been systematically eroded.
And that's critical, because the mind can't heal where it never gets quiet, and the body can't rest where it never feels safe.
Yeah.
And this sets the stage for all the psychological symptoms we're seeing.
Okay, so when the strain is chronic and the recovery is stolen, the symptoms manifest in ways that are just deeply confusing. We feel this distress, but we can't point to a specific villain that caused the anxiety or the emotional flatness. So this segment is all about understanding the non-acute reasons for our pervasive distress.
And let's start with anxiety. Without a specifics here, it's often called free-floating anxiety.
Free-floating.
It's this diffuse, chronic sense of uneasiness, restlessness, and just apprehension that isn't attached to any specific object or person or immediate threat. You feel jittery, tense, ready for trouble, even though your physical day is perfectly ordinary.
So why does the brain default to that state when there's no actual lion chasing us?
It's because of what's called anticipatory anxiety, which is driven by systemic uncertainty. Modern life is defined by ambiguity, economic instability, climate change, rapid technological change that threatens job security, political polarization.
The list goes on.
Right. And the brain activates threat responses to these unpredictable future events. Unpredictability itself is one of the most powerful and persistent stressors in all anxiety models.
So your amygdala, your brain's threat detector, it's misprocessing these abstract, uncertain future events as if they are present danger. The brain just can't calculate safety.
Exactly. The brain is excellent at solving problems in the present, but it's terrible at tolerating uncertainty about the future. So when there's endless abstract uncertainty, the brain remains in a constant state of anticipatory arousal.
There is a quote that really validated this for me.
Anxiety doesn't need a reason to feel real. It just needs uncertainty.
That's the one. You're not anxious because something bad is happening. You're anxious because your brain cannot confidently predict that nothing bad will happen.
And this chronic arousal leads us directly into a really necessary, nuanced definition of burnout. We have to see burnout as nervous system dysregulation. We have to move beyond just defining it as fatigue from overwork.
It's so much more than that.
It absolutely is. Burnout, physiologically, is a state of autonomic dysfunction. It's characterized by emotional exhaustion and depersonalization, sure, but those are symptoms of a nervous system that has lost the ability to regulate itself.
Between the fight or flight and the rest and digest system.
Exactly, the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. And burnout can manifest in two dominant states. One is sympathetic dominance, that chronic high alert state. That looks like jitteriness, insomnia, restlessness, hypervigilance. The body is stuck in go mode, even when there's nowhere to go.
And the other state.
The other state, which is often misdiagnosed, is dorsal vagal collapse. This is the shutdown state.
The freeze response.
It's the ultimate conservation strategy. The system is so overloaded it just collapses, leading to that profound fatigue, brain fog, difficulty initiating tasks, and emotional numbness.
That distinction explains the paradox of rest perfectly, why you can take a 2-week vacation, completely de-stress, and come back just as tired as you were before.
Precisely. The rest doesn't feel restorative because the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest system, it can't effectively activate. The nervous system has learned through chronic exposure to all this stress that rest isn't safe or even possible.
So it's stuck.
It's stuck. The insight we found sums it up perfectly. Burnout isn't about needing rest. It's about your nervous system forgetting how to feel safe.
And this brings us to emotional numbness and shutdown. When people experience that flatness or the inability to feel pleasure and hedonia, they often blame themselves. They think they're becoming cold or that it's a moral failing.
But the research is clear. This is a survival mechanism. This numbness is the brain's protective triage system. Under conditions of unsustainable chronic demand, the brain has to conserve energy. So it reallocates resources away from complex emotional processing and high-order problem solving, which are incredibly resource-intensive.
Right.
And it puts them toward fundamental survival functions, like just maintaining basic physical alert status.
So when you experience that severe brain fog, where you can't make even simple decisions, your executive function isn't just gone. Your brain is actively conserving cognitive energy by deprioritizing those higher functions.
It's the brain saying, I can't afford to feel deeply right now. And that high trust line from our sources is so essential for everyone listening. Numbness isn't coldness. It's your brain's way of saying, I can't feel right now without falling apart.
It's an adaptive, protective response to an overwhelming environment.
It is.
And this is so important because mislabeling this experience leads people to blame themselves, which only adds a layer of secondary stress to an already overburdened system.
Absolutely.
We need to shift the blame from the self to the structure. So we've spent all this time detailing the invisible structural burdens that explain why you feel exhausted. But this isn't a story without hope. In fact, that feeling of exhaustion itself is proof that your system is functioning exactly as it should be, just in the wrong environment. We need to explore the evolutionary mismatch.
The core finding in this segment is really about empowerment through understanding. The fatigue you feel is the friction created between your ancient biology, which evolved over millennia in environments of scarcity and acute immediate physical threats.
Right, like a predator.
Exactly. It's the friction between that biology and your modern reality, which is all about abundance and abstract chronic stress. Your biological adaptations are functioning correctly. They're just mismatched to this digital, always-on environment.
This is the moment to stop judging yourself. We have to reframe this entire experience, moving from self-criticism to just recognizing physiological physics. There's an analogy in our sources that perfectly sums this up.
You are not broken. You are a prehistoric machine trying to run high-speed digital software, and the overheating you feel is simply physics.
It's thermodynamics. not a moral failure.
Right. You cannot run a system designed for intermittent stress, a predator, a famine on a setting of perpetual low-grade stress, like a 247 news cycle and a constantly buzzing phone, without generating heat and eventual system burnout.
And this leads to such a powerful reframing of what resilience is. Resilience is adaptability, not toughness. We often treat it like this heroic quality only a few people have, but the research really challenges that.
Resilience is defined as an active process of successfully adjusting to challenges. It's not an absence of pain, but the capacity to bounce back. A large review of trauma studies found that about 65% of people showed a resilient trajectory.
65%, so it's the norm.
It's the common human outcome, not the rare exception.
So resilient people aren't necessarily tougher. What's the difference then, biologically?
The biological proof is in systems-level coordination. Resilient people are better able to maintain their basic metabolic rhythms, like the synchronized function of the circadian clock in the brain and the liver, even when conditions get chaotic.
So it's about regulation.
It's about how quickly your body can return to baseline after a stressor, which is a learned skill.
And that learned skill connects to the neuroplasticity of recovery. We often feel doomed by the changes we've gone through, believing that once the brain is set, it can't recover.
That's just outdated science. The adult brain retains a significant capacity to rewire and recover, even at 30, 50, or 70. Recovery isn't about returning to some old normal. The brain physically reorganizes and learns new pathways. And what accelerates that reorganization? Adaptive neural changes are fostered by creating the conditions of safety and novelty. Through movement, genuine learning, profound connection. The brain is always listening to the environment. If you consistently provide signals of safety, quiet, predictable rest, connection, the brain will begin to build new protective neural architecture.
So the knowledge we're sharing right now is itself a powerful tool for recovery. This idea of awareness as a stabilizing force.
Absolutely. Neurologically, just naming and acknowledging the feeling, shifting your internal narrative from "I am broken" to "my nervous system is responding correctly to unsustainable conditions," that has a powerful stabilizing benefit.
Why does that work?
When we name and contextualize this diffuse distress, we engage the prefrontal cortex, the brain's regulatory center. And the very act of labeling reduces the intensity of the emotion itself, which effectively calms the amygdala, the fight or flight center.
So it reduces the secondary stress, the worrying about the stress itself.
It provides instant shame reduction.
That reframing is everything. When you realize the struggle is structural, the feeling of distress stabilizes. The line from the sources was, what feels like breaking is actually recalibration.
And finally, we have to address the importance of structural support. We've established the problem is environmental. The data clearly shows that resilience is highly predicted by structural factors. Financial security, access to information, meaningful, safe relationships, not just individual grit.
This validates that the problem is external. Two people with identical work stress will have profoundly different outcomes based on whether they have connection, financial stability, and access to genuine downtime.
The environmental reality determines the capacity for recovery.
Yeah.
It shifts the question from "why can't I handle this?" to what environmental inputs need to be modified to make this system sustainable.
And this becomes important now because understanding this changes how you treat yourself and how you plan for your own recovery. So after this whole deep dive, we want to bring the tone back to something soft and grounded. You don't need to fix yourself tonight. You don't need a complicated 12-step plan to eliminate stress.
Yeah.
You just need to recognize with compassion and with clarity what you are responding to, the ambient strain, the neurological debt, the stolen recovery.
Awareness is enough to begin. Knowing that your free-floating anxiety is anticipatory arousal, responding to systemic uncertainty, or that your burnout is nervous system dysregulation, not just laziness, that can immediately halt the cycle of self-blame that makes the fatigue even worse.
We're committed to sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and expanding understanding with every single deep dive. So please, drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could shape our next deep dive. We really want to hear what resonated most with you.
We truly appreciate you joining us for this in-depth exploration.
And please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more My Mind MashUps deep dives.
You can find My Mind MashUps everywhere you listen. Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, Pocket Casts, Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over this week, building on that idea of structural support and environment. If resilience is determined more by social factors and environment than by personal strength, what is one non-digital, non-personal environmental input you can adjust this week to send a safety signal to your nervous system?
And we mean a structural one, not a behavioral change.
Right.
So maybe that means soundproofing your bedroom window with heavy curtains. Maybe it's dimming all the non-essential lights in your house after 8 p.m. Or just seeking 10 minutes of quiet, genuine darkness every night. Just one small structural adjustment to reclaim your capacity to rest.
Until the next deep dive, find your rhythm.
We'll talk soon.